Australians don't talk about salary the same way Americans do. If you watched episode 1, you already know Australians and Americans think they're living the same life they are not. Same language, same fast food chains, same football obsession, different country, different rules underneath all of it. And today we're going somewhere episode 1 didn't touch, the unwritten rulebook. The stuff nobody prints in a guidebook. The stuff that gets tourists side-eyed, corrected or quietly judged in real time, without a single word being said about it directly. By the end of this list, you're going to realize you've probably broken at least 3 of these without ever knowing it. Maybe more, if you've actually been to Australia and just assumed things went fine in rule number 7. That one has actually gotten American tourists asked to leave a pub. Not for being rude on purpose, but for not knowing when to stop. We'll get there. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is episode 2 of our Australia versus America series. So if you haven't seen episode 1 yet, go check that one out after this. It covers money habits, luxuries, and parenting styles Americans don't expect. And it's the video that set up a lot of what we're building on today. Today, it's 10 social rules, not laws, not written down anywhere, not posted on a sign, not something anyone will explicitly explain to you before you land. But break them, and Australians will know immediately that you're not from around here, even if they're too polite or too used to tourists to say anything about it out loud. Let's get into it. Rule 1. Americans hear mate and think it's the equivalent of buddy or pal, always warm, always casual, interchangeable no matter who's saying it or why. It's not that simple. And it's usually the very first rule tourists misread because it happens within the first few minutes of any conversation. In Australia, mate can mean genuine affection. It can also be a warning. Tone changes everything, and locals shift between the two so smoothly that most visitors never even notice it's happening. Thanks, mate, after someone holds a door? Friendly, easy, no second meaning. All right, mate said slowly, with a pause before it, and a flatter tone underneath. That's a de-escalation phrase. It means back off right now, before this gets worse than it needs to. Americans who use mate the same way every single time tend to miss this entirely. Locals pick up on tone shifts instantly, almost without thinking about it. If you're traveling through Australia and someone says mate in a clipped, flat voice with a longer pause than usual, that's genuinely not the moment to keep arguing your point. That's the moment to read the room and step back. Rule 2. Americans think they understand lines. They don't understand Australian lines, and the gap becomes obvious the first time it actually matters at a packed cafe counter, a footy match entrance, or a busy bus stop. In the US, queue cutting happens more than people admit. Someone's just asking a quick question. Someone already ordered. Someone slides in near a friend who's already near the front. It's small, it's common, and most people let it slide without saying anything. In Australia, that same move can get you publicly and immediately called out. And it usually happens fast. Not aggressively usually, just directly. Back of the line, mate said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear it clearly. There's no bureaucracy of politeness here, no passive-aggressive sighing. Just a direct correction, delivered in front of everyone, and the expectation that you'll take it without arguing. And speaking of getting corrected in public, Rule 4 is the one that actually causes real tension at barbecues, not the fun kind either. Rule 3. If an Australian invites you to a barbecue and says, just come, don't worry about anything, that is not a literal instruction to be taken at face value. That is closer to a test, one that every local instinctively already knows the answer to. You are still expected to bring something. Drinks, at minimum. Ideally, something to throw on the grill, too. Showing up completely empty-handed because the host said not to worry isn't seen as trusting their word. It's seen as not understanding how the culture actually works underneath what was said out loud. Americans who take the invitation literally show up empty-handed and confused later. Why the vibe felt slightly off for the rest of the afternoon. The rule isn't written anywhere, isn't mentioned in the invite. It's just known, the kind of thing every local absorbed so early they've forgotten it was ever a rule at all. Rule 4. Trash talk during sport is basically a national pastime in Australia. Cricket, especially, though it shows up everywhere games get competitive. It's called sledging, and it's expected, even respected, when it's done well and done with the right amount of wit behind it. Here's where Americans get it wrong, in one of two directions. Either they think it's all just harmless banter with no boundaries at all, or they think any trash talk is rude and get offended when locals expect them to dish some back. Both readings miss the actual rule. Sledging is allowed, even encouraged, right up until it targets someone's family, their character outside the game, or gets personal in a way that has nothing to do with the match. Cross that invisible line, even by accident, and the same crowd that was laughing a second earlier goes cold almost instantly. This next one is the pub story I teased at the very start, Rule 7. But first, 3 more you're probably already guilty of without knowing it. Rule 5. An Australian says how you going almost exactly the way an American says, hey, how's it going, while walking past someone without really slowing down. It is a greeting, nothing more. And it's said dozens of times a day by people who never expect a detailed answer to come back. Americans, trained by a culture that sometimes genuinely does want the real answer when someone asks how you're doing, occasionally launch into an actual update. Traffic on the way over, the flight delay, the hotel mix-up, the jet lag that's still hitting hard. The Australian who asked is now standing there, slightly trapped, nodding along, waiting for the 2-second version that never actually arrives. The correct response is short, almost automatic. Good, you. Then move on, no elaboration needed on either side. That's the whole exchange, start to finish. And treating it as anything longer is one of the fastest ways to mark yourself as visiting rather than local. Rule 6. Some Australian households expect shoes off at the door, no question, no exceptions, every single guest. Others genuinely don't care at all, and would be confused if someone started unlacing their shoes in the hallway. There's no universal national rule either way, which is exactly what trips Americans up, because they tend to walk in assuming one standard applies everywhere, the same rough assumption they might carry into a home back in the US. The safe move locals use, almost without thinking about it. Glance at the entryway before you even say hello. Row of shoes lined up neatly by the door. Take yours off too, no need to ask. Nothing there? Probably fine to keep them on. It's a read the room rule, not a written one, and Americans who don't know to look for that small signal either accidentally offend a strict household or awkwardly start taking their shoes off in a home that never expected it. Rule 7. In the US, tipping generously is almost always read as generosity, sometimes even status. In Australia, insisting on a tip, especially after a bartender or waiter has already declined it once, can come across very differently, as implying they're underpaid and need charity from a stranger. Wages already include a fair minimum, so the gesture, however well-intentioned, doesn't land the way it's meant to. The actual incident this rule is based on played out roughly like this. An American tourist kept pushing a tip on a bartender who'd already said no thanks, got increasingly insistent about it over several rounds, and the situation escalated to the point where staff eventually asked him to leave for the night. Not because tipping itself is offensive, because not taking no for an answer repeatedly in front of other customers became the actual problem. If a tip is declined, that's the end of it. Say thanks, pocket it. Don't push a second or third time no matter how generous the intention behind it is. Rule 8. Empty train, dozens of open seats stretching down the whole carriage, and someone still chooses to sit down directly next to a stranger. In parts of the US, that barely registers as anything unusual. In Australia, that reads as an immediate, visible red flag, and people will actually get up and move to a different seat, rather than say a word about it. The unwritten rule: leave a seat gap whenever one is genuinely available. Sitting close is reserved for when the carriage is genuinely full. Locals do this instinctively, without ever having been taught it directly. Tourists who don't know the rule usually find out the hard way not through a comment, but through a very obvious, very silent seat change. 2 left, and number 10 is the one that actually explains half of Rule 4. Rule 9. This one connects directly back to something from Episode 1. Australians don't talk about salary the same way Americans do, and viewers who watch that video already know how differently money gets discussed here. This rule goes further than money, though. It's about achievement in general, in almost any form it shows up. Get a promotion, buy a new car, land a big win at work. In America, talking it up is often expected, sometimes even encouraged. In Australia, walking around openly proud of an achievement without deflecting it or downplaying it first tends to get you knocked down a peg by the people around you fairly quickly. Not out of jealousy, it's cultural correction, applied almost automatically. The expectation is, mention it once, briefly, then let someone else bring it back up later if they actually want to keep talking about it. It's called tall poppy syndrome, and it's the same instinct sitting behind Rule 4 from earlier sledging exists, partly because nobody's allowed to seem like they think they're above getting roasted a little, achievement or not. Rule 10. Skipping sunscreen in America might get you a sunburn and nothing else, maybe a comment from a parent if you're a kid. Skipping it in Australia, visibly, out in the open in front of Australians, tends to get you an actual comment from a total stranger. Not a joke, not a passing remark, a real direct "you're going to regret that" from someone who has grown up watching skin cancer rates that rank among the highest anywhere in the world. Hats indoors at school, generally not allowed. Hats outside at school, mandatory in a lot of places. Down to an actual named policy, it's called no hat, no play. And kids who forget theirs often aren't allowed out into the sun until they find one. Sunscreen isn't framed as optional self-care, the way it sometimes gets treated in the US. Fits closer to a seatbelt, something you just do without being asked, and something locals will genuinely call out if they see a visitor skipping it. So that's 10. Mate that isn't always friendly, sacred cues that get you called out fast. BYO that isn't optional, no matter what the invite said. Sledging with invisible limits nobody explains up front. A greeting that isn't actually a question. Shoes that depend entirely on a glance at the door, tipping that can backfire if you push it too far. Train seats with unwritten spacing rules. Bragging that gets cut down almost instantly. And sunscreen that's treated as basically mandatory, not optional. Now here's what I actually want to know. Which one of these did you already know about before this video, and which one just embarrassed you a little, even privately? Because I guarantee at least one of these 10 is going to get argued about in the comments the second this goes up. Americans are going to say number 7 sounds dramatized. Australians are going to say I left one out entirely. Honestly, both sides are probably right. Drop the rule you think I missed. And if you've actually broken one of these in real life, tell that story in the comments. Those are always the best comments on this entire channel. And if this was episode 2 for you, go ahead and hit subscribe right now. See you in the next one.